Welcome. Let's settle for the details. More oil marketing firms are increasing prices of petroleum products at the pumps. The latest is two of the industry's giants, Gold and Shell. The two are all selling a liter of petrol at 14 cedis 80 pesos. Diesel is going for 14 cedis 92 pesos. Star Oil took the lead yesterday, selling a liter of diesel at 14 cedis 79 pesos and petrol going for 13 cedis 88 pesos. Most of the oil marketing companies have linked the recent round of increases to the depreciating cedi and rising prices of finished petroleum products on the world market. Let's go on the phone line and engage the Executive Secretary of COPEC, Duncan Amwa. Hello, Duncan. Thank you for always joining us. Does the increase reflect your expectations?
I would say that the oil marketing companies collectively have been very, very good to Ghanaians. If you look at the numbers we are seeing so far from the market, there's every indication that some amount of increases have been shelved already. And so the full extent of increases possible, looking at where the city stands now, looking at where international market prices also stand, we clearly didn't get the full extent of the increase. So for us, this is very good, and we commend highly the various oil marketing companies for not passing everything to the market. Fuel could have crossed 15 Ghana cedis, without a blink. But as we speak, diesel that was expected to have actually gone to about some 15.4 is still trading around 14.9 for thereabout. That for us is within projections, is within the numbers, and we think that the OMCs have been quite okay for this particular window.
Right. What would you say has been the role of the cedi depreciation in the pricing window?
That has been quite phenomenal. If you look at just 2 weeks ago, the Chamber Bulk Oil Distribution Company, Seaboard, were actually using for their market purposes an exchange of 14.95 exchange to $1 to compute for their pricing to the oil marketing companies. If you look at the window we just started, the 14.95 has now moved to about 15.55, a difference of about 60 pesos every liter. That clearly is significant. And so the cedi poor run of form over the past 2 weeks clearly would also be accounting for where we find ourselves now, where across the world quite a significant number of countries have had fuel prices decline. But in Ghana, your prices have rather gone up due largely to the poor performance of the local currency. So the cedi has contributed in no small ways to where we are.
With the current expectations and some projections of the cedi stabilizing, do you expect fuel prices to somewhat come down in the next pricing window?
What we are quite confident of is that if indeed the cedi stabilizes with the inflow of this IMF 360 million USD into the economy, then possibility of petrol prices being stable for next window or probably going down exists immeasurably. But as it stands, you cannot even be sure, because we saw in February when the IMF money came, that was when the city decided to start, depreciating a few days after the money had come. So we'll just wait to see by the middle of the month to see how bad or good the city's run of form gets. And if it gets good, as has been projected, I am quite certain that fuel prices would not only stabilize, but it will come down before the end of the month, July.
But Duncan, what is the situation with LPG prices now?
As we projected, it's gone up. So what could have happened, like we were expecting, based on industry numbers, some 8-9%, what we have reported so far from some of the LPG outlets, about 5-6%. That clearly is okay. It falls within the range of numbers that we saw from the BPCs going into the window. Unfortunately, like we've always said, LPG is an essential transitional product that you would need because of environmental factors. And so anything that could be done by the state, we know that they are already signed to an IMF program. You may not be able to reduce taxes, as much as you would have wished to. But LPG would still have an environmental effect if we continue to simply allow prices to increase, if we continue to simply sit and watch price movement continue to inch up. So something ought to be done about it. What will be done about LPG, we are not sure, but clearly we cannot continue to sit and watch prices of LPG continue to go up. When that happens, they are simply pushing the very vulnerable people who don't have the means to afford off the use of LPG. Already, you are around 22% for national penetration. That means that 78% of your people who need LPG or one form of energy to be able to even go about their domestic stuff, unfortunately would have to depend on charcoal and firewood. And that for us has dire environmental consequences. And the earlier we look at pricing of LPG in the country and the removal of taxes, if immediately possible, the better we could be able to safeguard the environment completely.
Right, so as a chamber, what will be the next move to help ensure that prices do not increase?
As I speak with you, we are still in an engagement, even with the National Petroleum Authority, on all these matters. What we understand is that they do send advisories across to cabinet, across the economic management team, every now and then to take a second look at LPG. And so we might get to a point where, of course, the state would see the need to ease on these taxes that we slapped on LPG with a view to bringing down LPG prices completely. I've indicated this elsewhere. LPG used to be a byproduct that was fled. We just deposited this into the environment without any commercial value. If today people have realized there's a need to actually use LPG for cleaner cooking and all that, we should be able to encourage them to use more LPG and industrialize this country as opposed to making it prohibitive for people to be able to access LPG. So we are still with the NPA. We'll continue, the push, the dialogue, the negotiation, and hopefully something might come out of it sooner than later.
Right. Thank you very much, Duncan. Duncan Amwa is the Executive Secretary of Chamber of Petroleum Consumers. Moving on, governments will in the coming days launch a program to help Eurobond investors exchange their old papers for new ones. This was after the investors agreed to the terms of restructuring for more than $13 billion debt. George Rafi has more.
Finance Minister Dr. Mohamed Amin Adam, who disclosed this at a joint press conference with the IMF and the World Bank, revealed that the process should be concluded September this year.
We remain committed to engaging and resolving our non-bonded commercial indebtedness as well. So while the restructuring process has been challenging, we deliberately chose to implement an economic reset.
Dr. Mohamed Amin Adam also revealed that they are currently looking at all options available when it comes to financing the proposed sinking fund to meet future obligations to these creditors.
That we already have a sinking fund. And so with the economy growing and revenue increasing, you could do allocations specifically to the sinking fund to increase your debt repayment capacity in future.
The finance minister noted that despite 2024 being an election year, they are committed to tighten expenditure to avoid slippages. He believes that all these developments will go a long way to restore investor confidence in the economy.
Director of the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research, Professor Peter Korte, is calling on the government to improve revenue mobilization by addressing existing revenue loopholes. Professor Korte believes that closing these gaps will help the government generate the necessary funds to enhance its fiscal space. He made these comments in an interview with Joy Business on the sidelines of the ESES Quarterly Economic Roundtable in Accra.
We have a deficit problem, a recurrent budget deficit problem. We have to resolve the deficit because we finance the deficit through borrowing, and that is where the problem is. So how do you solve your deficit? By increasing revenue, domestic revenue mobilization. We are not saying we should increase taxes, but rather be more efficient in our tax collection efforts so that we're able to rake in more revenue. Digitalization has been started, but we can do a bit more in trying to use online systems, in trying to minimize human interface so that we can be more efficient in our tax collection and try to reduce corruption and the leakages within revenue mobilization system. Then expenditure. Some expenditures can be rationalized. We have to look at procurement of goods and services and even wages and salaries. Are we paying the right number of people, or we need to rationalize and offload some to the private sector? But look at government wage bill, it's huge, about 50% of total revenue. Yet the same people say they are underpaid. So it tells you there are too many people who we are pretending to be paying, who also pretend to be working. And we have to really look at that. Once we solve the deficit problem, then we can look at the existing debt. How do we manage it? Let's put a cap. We legislate it, don't just say it and leave it. Legislate it so that Parliament will have an oversight and monitor and ensure that our debt GDP doesn't exceed, let's say, 60%. We also look at some of the indicators, export revenue, growth in export revenue, because we paid our debt through our export revenue. So look at all of that so we minimize the debt, ensure value for money, borrow to invest. Don't borrow to consume. That will not help us. Let's invest so that we'll be able to generate additional resources to repay the debt as they fall due, while we also avoid tied aid. Because tied aid doesn't help us. Aid tied to conditions, tied to donor contractors, tied to procurement of goods from donor country. We have to get competitive pricing.
You're still watching Business Live with me, Emma Davis. We'll take a quick breather. We'll be back with more. Welcome. A look at one of our headline stories as the Ghana Statistical Service is cautioning governments to intervene in the exponential population growth in the Greater Accra region, covering smaller land spaces. According to the service, the country's population growth will increase by 6.41 million by 2030. Speaking to Joy Business after launching the population projections for 2021 to 2050, Deputy Government Statistician Dr. Faustina Frimpong disclosed that there will be more development works required to cater for the growth. Here's more.
The aim of the population projection is to offer insight into the future demographic landscape whilst informing policymakers, researchers, and the public about potential changes. According to the Ghana Statistical Service, this is also critical for tracking the implementation of national, continental, and global development goals. One key takeaway from the results is the population pressure on the Greater Accra region, which is expected to deepen by 2030, a phenomenon that is likely to affect the land size of the region. Deputy Government Statistician Dr. Faustina Frimpong cautioned that policymakers must intervene to realign the development of structures in the region.
The one that I think government should really consider is the pressure on the land in Accra, because the population density in Accra is way beyond what we're thinking. I mean, in certain documents, they projected that by 2050, in Ghana itself should be 157 person per square kilometer. But we will reach this number in 2030. The whole country, by 2030, there will be, in totality, 156.7 people per square kilometer. And when you break it down to various areas, because Accra land site is the smallest, more people there put much pressure in there. And so the kind of structures we put up, some of these things must be considered in their decision making to help ensure that we contain all these people within the country.
Ghana's projected total population in 2024 is over 33 million, which is 1.07 times that of 2021 figure of 30.8 million. How will this affect the country's productivity? The Deputy Government Statistician explains.
The proportion of children 0 to 14 years, the number is reducing. It decreased from 44.6% in 1960 to 35% in 2021, and further to decrease to 29% by 2050. However, you see those aged 60 years and older, it increased from 6.5 in 2021 and is projected to go to about 10.8% in 2050. Now, I say this because the care for the elderly is different from the care for children. And therefore, if you have almost 11% of your population being the 60 years and older, health service delivery, vehicular, places for the elderly, have we made provision for that? And so these are things that the government should look at the various components, because the needs across these age groups are not the same. And therefore, each needs or each broad age group has specific needs. So they should look at it and then tackle it in that direction.
Greater Accra also has the highest population of school-going age and expected to increase further by 2030.
To the aviation sector, as some players are calling on government to further consider expanding investments. According to Managing Director for Aviance Ghana, Mark Kamis, more airlines are interested in operating in Ghana, hence the need for more investments in infrastructure. He spoke to Joy Business at the launch of Aviance Ghana's new lounge at the Kotoka International Airport.
I think in terms of growth, I don't think you'll see too much growth coming from Accra. I think it's pretty saturated. But what you will see is airlines that have been well established here, like British Airways, increasing flights from 7 to 11 flights. You'll see Kenya Airways increasing the market from like a 737 to a 7A. And you'll see the likes of Ethiopian also increasing and making Accra into a hub. So there's some really exciting times for Accra ahead. I think, look, we always see the government as more of a partnership on how we can develop. And we're very excited always to work with the ministers in terms of aviation and hospitality. We've always had so much support, which we're very grateful for. We are a Ghanaian company. We've just hired over 1,000 extra employees, 200 employees extra in November 2023. So certainly Aviance is doing its bit to stimulate the market. Yeah, I think, look, we're always looking for the government support, and I think where that could be is we could look at facilities better, infrastructure. I think the Accra airport today is probably nearly at capacity, could do a bit more. So I think from a government perspective, what we would be looking at for is investment in infrastructure.
Government says it will make land banks available to private developers to reduce Ghana's housing deficit. Works and Housing Minister Kojo Ponkroma says government will also explore ways of introducing tax waivers on imported machines for large-scale construction projects. He was speaking at the second phase of the O'Grandson housing project.
Solutions for more affordable housing options for urban dwellers continue to be a challenge.
We'll bring you that story later on, but moving on, the German Development Corporation, to improve employment services, has donated vehicles and equipment to the Labour Department of the Ministry of Employment and Labour Relations. According to the coordinator at GIZ Ghana's Sustainable Economic Cluster, Wilhelm Hugo, the support is aimed at enhancing the operational capabilities of the department to promote employment. There's more in this report.
The donation by the German Development Corporation in partnership with the European Union to 5 regions in the country is aimed at improving the overall functionality of the public employment centers. The items donated included vehicles, IT equipment, and furniture. Coordinator of GIZ Ghana's Sustainable Economic Cluster, Wilhelm Hugo, said the initiative will contribute to the creation of a robust labor market in the country.
And of course, I would like to visit you all in the 4 regions that are also getting cars. Together with my dear colleague Andreas. Very much looking forward to see you not only here in Accra, but of course also in the regions. Very much looking forward to the continuous fruitful cooperation between the ministry, German Development Corporation, German Embassy and the EU delegation.
Minister of Employment and Labour Relations, Ignatius Bafwewa, urged the workers to uphold a good maintenance culture.
You may be aware, especially for those of you who are coming from the regions, that we are also facilitating the construction of PECs in some selected areas. And when you come to the Bono area, a new PEC is being put up at Techiman, another one at Brekum, one at Goso, and then another one in Kumasi. And interestingly, these are areas where these vehicles are also going to. Then it means that you are going to have not just a vehicle, you are going to have office equipment, and then you are going to have offices to operate from. That then means that you will have no excuse whatsoever in improving on your output. I want to say that we are so grateful to you, and I will expect the Chief Labour Officer to instruct his people to take very good care of these facilities.
The initiative is part of a broader strategy to build in-house capacities within the Ghanaian Labour Administration.
That'll be all for today's edition of Business Live. But for more news, do log on to My Joy Online, and our top stories there are fuel price increase, diesel selling at 14 cedis, 92 per Swiss, petrol going for 14 cedis, 80 per Swiss a litre. Cedi remains stable as foreign exchange demand eases. $1 equals 15 cedis, 90 per Swiss. My name is Emma Davis, and thank you for your company. Good evening.